The scorching sun beat down on Lily Anderson as she darted through the crowded street of Breckenridge, Colorado, her heart pounding against her ribs like a wild Mustang. It was 1876, and the bustling mining town had little mercy for a woman alone with empty pockets and a desperate heart. "Stop that thief!" The furious voice of Mr. Hargrove, the general store owner, pierced the afternoon air. His thick fingers pointed accusingly at Lily's retreating form as she clutched a small loaf of bread to her chest. Lily hadn't eaten in 2 days. The bread had been sitting there, fresh and warm, and her trembling hands had moved before her better judgment could intervene. Now, as she ran, her worn boots kicking up dust from Breckenridge's Main Street, she knew the mistake would cost her dearly. "Grab her!" Someone shouted, and Lily felt rough hands seize her arms. The bread tumbled to the dirt as 2 men dragged her toward the center of town where a small crowd was already gathering, drawn by the commotion. Sheriff Bolton emerged from his office, his weathered face impassive as Mr. Hargrove explained the situation with exaggerated gestures. "Caught her red-handed, Sheriff. This town's getting overrun with thieves, and I aim to make an example of this one." The sheriff sighed, adjusting his hat against the glaring sun. "What do you propose, Hargrove?" "The whipping post," Hargrove declared, his face flushed with self-righteous anger. 10 lashes ought to teach her and anyone else thinking of stealing from honest merchants." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Public whippings were uncommon in Breckenridge but not unheard of. The wooden post stood at the edge of the town square, a grim reminder of frontier justice. "Please," Lily begged, her voice barely above a whisper. "I haven't eaten in days." "I was desperate." "Silence," Hargrove spat. "Thieves always have excuses." The sheriff looked uncomfortable but nodded slowly. "The law is clear on theft, madam. Mr. Hargrove has the right to demand punishment." Lily's knees weakened as the men began dragging her toward the post. Her chestnut hair fell across her face, hiding the tears that threatened to spill. 22 years old and alone in the world, she had come west seeking a new beginning after losing her parents to influenza back in Pennsylvania. Now she would be publicly humiliated, her back torn open before strangers. "Wait!" A deep voice cut through the commotion. The crowd parted as a tall figure stepped forward. Quinn Patterson dismounted from his bay stallion, his movements unhurried but purposeful. His dark Stetson cast a shadow over piercing blue eyes that surveyed the scene with quiet intensity. Dust clung to his denim pants and faded blue shirt, testament to a long ride. "What's the meaning of this?" he asked, his voice calm but carrying enough authority to quiet the crowd. "This woman's a thief," Hargrove declared. "She stole bread from my store and she's getting what she deserves." Quinn's gaze shifted to Lily, their eyes meeting for a brief, electric moment. Something passed between them, recognition, perhaps, though they had never met before. "You're mistaken," Quinn said, turning back to face the merchant and sheriff. "She can't be a thief." "I caught her myself," Hargrove protested. Quinn removed his hat, revealing thick, dark hair as he stepped closer to Lily. "This woman is my wife." A collective gasp arose from the onlookers. Lily stared at him, wide-eyed and speechless. "Your wife," Sheriff Bolton repeated skeptically. "Yes," Quinn affirmed without hesitation. "We were married in Denver last month. I've been away on business and she must have forgotten the money I left her." He turned to Lily, his expression softening. "Isn't that right, darlin'?" Lily swallowed hard, understanding immediately what this stranger was offering: salvation from the whip in exchange for a lie. She nodded, finding her voice. "Yes, I'm sorry. I was confused and hungry. I thought I'd lost the money." Quinn reached into his pocket and produced several coins, which he handed to the still fuming Hargrove. This should cover the bread and any inconvenience. I apologize for my wife's behavior." The sheriff studied Quinn carefully. "I don't recall seeing you around Breckenridge before, Patterson." "Just arrived," Quinn replied smoothly. "Bought the old Miller place outside town last month. Been fixing it up while handling some business in Denver." He placed his hand gently on Lily's shoulder. "I didn't expect my wife to arrive before me." Sheriff Bolton looked unconvinced, but the crowd was losing interest now that the promise of a whipping had evaporated. "Well, make sure she understands we don't tolerate theft in this town, married woman or not." "I'll ensure she remembers," Quinn promised, his voice carrying just enough edge to satisfy the sheriff. Hargrove wasn't ready to let go. "How do we know he's telling the truth? I've never seen either of them before." Quinn's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, an older woman stepped forward from the crowd. "I can vouch for Mr. Patterson," she said firmly. "My brother in Denver mentioned him purchasing property here." The woman, whom Lily recognized as Mrs. Winters from the boarding house, gave her a subtle wink. Sheriff Bolton nodded, apparently satisfied. "That settles it then. Take your wife home, Patterson, and keep her out of trouble." Quinn nodded, taking Lily's arm gently but firmly, leading her toward his horse. The crowd dispersed, disappointed at being denied their spectacle of justice. Once they were out of earshot, Lily whispered, "Why did you do that?" "Mount up," Quinn replied quietly. "We'll talk when we're away from town." He helped her onto his horse before swinging up behind her. As they rode out of Breckenridge, Lily felt the curious stares of townspeople following them. She sat stiffly, acutely aware of the stranger's chest against her back, his arms on either side of her as he held the reins. They rode in silence for nearly 20 minutes, following a winding trail into the foothills west of town. Finally, Quinn guided the horse off the main trail toward a small cabin nestled among pine trees. A modest corral stood nearby, empty except for a dappled gray mare. As they dismounted, Lily finally got a proper look at her rescuer. Quinn Patterson was taller than average, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscular build of a man who worked hard for a living. His face was handsome but weathered by sun and wind, with a strong jaw shadowed by a day's worth of stubble. She guessed him to be about 30. "Thank you," Lily said, finding her voice at last. "But I don't understand why you helped me." Quinn led his horse to a water trough before answering. "No one deserves the whipping post for a loaf of bread." His voice was matter of fact without a hint of self-congratulation, but claiming I'm your wife, that's a serious lie to tell. A ghost of a smile crossed his features. "Would you rather I'd thought of something else?" "No," Lily admitted. "I'm grateful, truly." She hesitated, looking around. "Is this really your place?" "It is now." Quinn removed his saddlebags and carried them toward the cabin. "Bought it last month, like I said, been fixing it up when I can." Lily followed him uncertainly. "I should go back to town." "I can't impose and say what?" Quinn interrupted, pausing at the cabin door. "That I lied. That you're not my wife. You'd be at that post before sunset." The truth of his words sank in. Lily had nowhere to go, no money, no food, and now she was entangled in a deception that could land them both in trouble. "What do you propose then?" she asked. Quinn pushed open the cabin door. "For now, you stay here. Tomorrow we figure out something more permanent." The cabin's interior was simple but clean, one main room with a small kitchen area, a table with 2 chairs, a stone fireplace, and a bed tucked in the corner behind a half-drawn curtain. A few personal items suggested recent habitation. "You can take the bed," Quinn said, setting down his saddlebags. "I'll sleep by the fire." Lily stood awkwardly near the door. "This is very kind, but I don't even know you. Why would you go to such lengths for a stranger?" Quinn busied himself lighting a fire in the hearth. My pa always said you can judge a town by how it treats its most vulnerable. What I saw today didn't speak well for Breckenridge. He straightened up, dusting his hands. Besides, I know what it's like to be desperate. He moved to a cupboard and took out some jerky, dried apples, and a tin of coffee. It's not much, but it'll hold you until I can hunt something fresh tomorrow. Lily's stomach growled at the sight of food, reminding her that hunger had started this whole ordeal. "Thank you," she said again, accepting the simple meal gratefully. As she ate, Quinn prepared coffee on the small stove, his movements efficient and practiced. "You got a name?" he asked, his back to her. Lily Anderson," he nodded. "Quinn Patterson, though I reckon you figured that much." "You're not from Colorado, are you?" Lily asked, detecting a slight accent. "Texas originally. Moved around a lot since the war." He poured 2 cups of coffee and sat across from her. "What brought you to Breckenridge alone?" Lily wrapped her fingers around the warm cup. "My parents died last winter in Pennsylvania. I had an uncle in Denver who offered to take me in, but when I arrived, I found he'd passed away too." She sighed. "I took what work I could find, but Denver's expensive. I heard there were opportunities in mining towns, so I spent the last of my money on the stagecoach to Breckenridge. And found nothing. I found plenty of saloons looking for girls, but not the kind of work I'm willing to do." Lily's cheeks flushed slightly. "I've been sleeping in the livery stable for 3 nights. Today was the first time I stole anything." Quinn's expression softened. "We've all done things we're not proud of when survival's at stake." They lapsed into silence as dusk settled outside the cabin windows. Lily felt exhaustion creeping into her bones, the day's terror and relief taking its toll. "You should rest," Quinn said, noticing her drooping eyelids. "Take the bed. We'll sort things out in the morning." Lily wanted to protest but was too tired to argue. She retreated behind the curtain, removed only her boots, and lay down on the surprisingly comfortable bed. Despite her situation alone in a strange man's cabin, miles from town, she felt safer than she had in weeks. She listened to Quinn moving quietly around the cabin, banking the fire and preparing his own bed near the hearth. Just before sleep claimed her, Lily realized something strange when Quinn had announced to the crowd that she was his wife. Part of her had felt an inexplicable sense of rightness, as though fate had finally dealt her a kind hand. Morning came with the gentle sound of rain pattering against the cabin roof. Lily opened her eyes, momentarily disoriented before remembering the previous day's events. She pushed back the curtain to find the main room empty, though the fire had been recently stoked. She spotted a basin of fresh water, a small towel, and to her surprise a simple blue dress laid across one of the chairs. As she examined it, the cabin door opened and Quinn entered, rain dripping from his hat and coat. "Morning," he greeted her. "Hope you slept well." "I did," Lily replied, gesturing to the dress. "Where did this come from?" Quinn hung his wet coat near the fire. "Rode out at dawn to the Wilkins place about 3 miles east. They've got a daughter about your size who married last year and moved to Denver. Mrs. Wilkins was happy to part with some of the things she left behind." Lily touched the fabric, moved by his thoughtfulness. "You didn't have to do that. Figured you could use something clean." He nodded toward a small package on the table. "Got some other necessities too, and breakfast." The package contained a hairbrush, soap, and other personal items that made Lily blush slightly at his consideration. On the table was a cloth-wrapped bundle that proved to contain fresh biscuits and jam. "You've thought of everything," she murmured. Quinn shrugged. "Mrs. Wilkins insisted. Said no new bride should be without basics." The word bride hung in the air between them, a reminder of their precarious deception. "About that," Lily began hesitantly. "What do we do now? I can't pretend to be your wife indefinitely. Quinn poured himself coffee. I've been thinking about that. We've got two options as I see it. First, you could stay here a few days until things cool down in town, then slip away on the eastbound stage. I'd give you enough money to get started somewhere new. Lily nodded slowly. And the second option, you stay. Quinn met her eyes directly. Not as a pretend wife, but as a housekeeper or partner of sorts. This place needs work, and I could use an extra pair of hands. In return, you'd have a roof, food, and a monthly wage once my situation improves. Your situation, Quinn's expression grew guarded. I've got plans for this land. Breeding horses, eventually. Right now, I'm working odd jobs and doing some contract work for the mining company while I get established. Lily considered his offer. The prospect of starting over again in yet another strange town was daunting, especially with no money or connections. But staying meant continuing a deception that could have consequences for them both. What about the townspeople? They think we're married. Folks around here mind their business if you mind yours, Quinn said. But if it bothers you, we could say you're my sister or cousin come to help out. After yesterday, no one would believe that. Quinn conceded the point with a slight nod. Then we keep up appearances in town when necessary. Here, things are as they are, two people helping each other out. It was a practical arrangement, Lily realized. She needed shelter and security. He needed help establishing his homestead. Yet something in his direct gaze suggested there might be another reason for his offer, one neither of them was ready to acknowledge. I'd like to stay, she decided. At least until I can repay your kindness. Relief flickered across Quinn's features. Good. That's settled then. Over breakfast, they discussed the work needed on the cabin and land. Quinn had purchased 40 acres, including a creek and good grazing land, but the previous owner had let things fall into disrepair. I'll be heading into town later, Quinn said as they finished eating. Need to pick up supplies and let folks see us together to cement our story. Lily nodded, though the thought of facing the townspeople again made her nervous. I'll try not to embarrass you. Just be yourself, Quinn advised. The less we say about our marriage, the less we have to remember later. While Quinn tended to the horses, Lily washed up and changed into the blue dress. It fit reasonably well, though it was a bit loose around the waist. She braided her chestnut hair and secured it at the nape of her neck, assessing her appearance in the small mirror hanging by the door. The woman looking back seemed different, somehow less haunted, more hopeful. By mid-morning, the rain had stopped, and they set out for Breckenridge. Lily rode the gray mare, which Quinn informed her was named Penny. The ride gave Lily her first proper look at the land that was now her temporary home. The cabin sat in a small clearing surrounded by pine forest, with mountains rising dramatically to the west. A creek wound through the property, and wildflowers dotted the meadows despite the early autumn season. It's beautiful here, Lily remarked, breathing in the pine-scented air. That's what caught my eye, Quinn agreed. Good water, shelter from winter winds, and close enough to town for supplies but far enough for privacy. As they approached Breckenridge, Lily felt her anxiety return. The town had nearly cost her a whipping yesterday. Today, she was returning as Quinn Patterson's supposed wife. Quinn seemed to sense her unease. Remember, you've got as much right to be there as anyone. Hold your head up. Breckenridge was bustling with the usual midday activity. Miners off shift mingled with shopkeepers and travelers, while wagons navigated the muddy Main Street. Heads turned as Quinn and Lily rode in, curiosity evident in the stares and whispers. Their first stop was the general store, the very place where Lily had stolen the bread. Mr. Hargrove's expression soured when they entered, but Quinn stepped forward with confidence. Mr. Hargrove, I believe we got off on the wrong foot yesterday. My wife and I would like to properly introduce ourselves and establish an account for regular purchases." He extended his hand, which the storekeeper reluctantly shook. "An account requires credit references," Hargrove said stiffly. Quinn produced a letter from his pocket. "A bank reference from Denver, and I'll pay cash for the first month's purchases." Hargrove examined the letter, his expression gradually softening at what must have been a satisfactory recommendation. "Very well, Mr. Patterson. What can I help you with today?" As Quinn arranged for supplies, Lily browsed the store, acutely aware of Mrs. Hargrove watching her from behind the fabric counter. Finally, the older woman approached. "So you're Quinn Patterson's wife," she said, her tone somewhere between curious and suspicious. "We don't know much about your husband in these parts." Lily summoned a smile. "We're private people, madam. Quinn's been establishing our homestead while I was visiting family in Denver." Mrs. Hargrove sniffed. "Odd that he wouldn't mention having a wife when he first arrived." "My husband doesn't believe in bringing personal matters into business," Lily replied, thinking quickly. "And he wasn't certain when I would be joining him." Before Mrs. Hargrove could probe further, Quinn appeared at Lily's side. "Found everything we need, darling. Mr. Hargrove will have it delivered tomorrow." The use of the endearment sent an unexpected flutter through Lily's chest. "That's wonderful," she replied, slipping naturally into the role of devoted wife. "Did you remember flour for bread?" "And sugar for your tea," Quinn confirmed, his hand coming to rest at the small of her back as he guided her toward the door. The casual intimacy of the gesture was both startling and comforting. They visited several other shops, Quinn introducing Lily as his wife with such ease that even she almost believed it. At the dress shop, he insisted on purchasing fabric for new clothes, and at the mercantile, he selected household items with Lily's input. "People are watching us," Lily whispered as they left the mercantile. "Let them," Quinn replied. "The more they see us behaving like a normal married couple, the less they'll question our story." Their final stop was the Silver Dollar Saloon, where Quinn needed to speak with the owner about lumber for the corral he was building. As they entered, conversation dimmed briefly before resuming at a slightly higher volume. The saloon was typical of mining towns, a long bar, several tables where card games were in progress, and a small stage where a piano player half-heartedly tinkered with a popular tune. A few women in colorful dresses circulated among the patrons, and one approached Quinn immediately. "Well, if it isn't the handsome carpenter," she said, her painted lips curved in a familiar smile. "I missed you last week." Lily tensed, but Quinn's expression remained neutral. "Evening, Rose. I'm here to see Frank about that lumber." Rose's gaze shifted to Lily, her smile faltering slightly. "And who's this, my wife Lily?" Quinn said simply. "Lily, this is Rose. She works here." Understanding dawned in Rose's eyes. "Your wife? Well, isn't that interesting?" She looked Lily up and down. "Didn't know you were married when you helped fix our stairs last month." "Wasn't a relevant detail for the job," Quinn replied evenly. "Is Frank in his office?" Rose nodded toward a door at the back, her demeanor cooler now. "Same as always." As Quinn excused himself to speak with Frank, Lily found herself alone with Rose, who was still studying her with undisguised curiosity. "So, how long have you and Quinn been married?" Rose asked, her voice sweet but her eyes sharp. "Not long," Lily answered carefully. "We met in Denver." "Denver?" Rose raised an eyebrow. "Funny, Quinn told me he came from Texas last time we chatted." "He did," Lily confirmed, "but we met in Denver where I was living at the time." Rose leaned closer. "Word around town is he claimed you as his wife mighty quick yesterday when you were caught stealing." Heat rose in Lily's cheeks. "A misunderstanding. I'd lost the money he gave me." "I'm sure." Rose said skeptically. Quinn's a good man, too good to be mixed up with a thief. If you're using him for protection or his property, I love my husband, Lily interrupted, the words surprising her even as she spoke them. Whatever you think you know about us, you're mistaken. Rose stepped back, reassessing Lily with new eyes. Well, perhaps you do. Just remember, honey men like Quinn have options in towns like this. Before Lily could respond, Quinn returned. Everything all right? He asked, noticing the tension between the women. Just getting acquainted with your wife, Rose said sweetly. Congratulations, Quinn, she seems devoted. Quinn's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. We should get going, he said to Lily. Daylight's burning. Outside, Lily released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. You didn't tell me you had admirers in town. Quinn helped her mount Penny before responding. Rose is friendly with all the men who do work at the saloon. It doesn't mean anything. She seemed to think differently. A hint of a smile touched Quinn's lips. Jealous, Mrs. Patterson. The teasing note in his voice eased Lily's tension. Merely looking out for our charade. Hard to convince people we're happily married if you have a saloon girl making eyes at you. Quinn mounted his horse. You handled Rose just fine from what I could see. What did you tell her? Lily felt heat rise in her cheeks again. I may have told her I love my husband. Quinn's expression shifted, something unreadable flickering in his blue eyes. That was quick thinking. They rode in companionable silence for a while, each lost in thought. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the trail as they made their way back to the cabin. Lily found herself studying Quinn's profile against the backdrop of mountains and sky, wondering about the man who had so drastically altered her circumstances in the span of a day. Why horses? She asked suddenly. Quinn glanced at her. Pardon, you said you planned to breed horses. Why that specifically? His expression softened. My grandfather raised horses in Kentucky before moving to Texas. Some of my earliest memories are of helping him with the foals. He adjusted his hat against the setting sun. After the war, I drifted for a while, did whatever work I could find. But horses, they've always made sense to me in a way people sometimes don't. Lily nodded, understanding. My father kept a small orchard back home, apple trees. I used to help with the grafting and harvesting. She smiled at the memory. I miss the smell of apple blossoms in spring. Perhaps we could plant a few trees, Quinn suggested. The soil's good near the creek. The casual way he included her in future plans wasn't lost on Lily. Their arrangement was temporary, yet here he was, contemplating apple trees that would take years to bear fruit. Back at the cabin, they unloaded the few supplies they'd brought back and fell into an unexpectedly comfortable routine. Quinn tended to the horses while Lily prepared a simple supper from their stores. As darkness fell, they sat before the fire, Quinn whittling a piece of wood while Lily mended a tear in one of his shirts. What did the lumber merchant say? Lily asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Delivery next week, Quinn replied, his knife moving steadily along the grain. I'm hoping to have the corral expanded before winter. Eventually, I'll need a proper barn, but that'll have to wait until spring. What else needs doing before winter? Quinn set down his whittling. Roof needs patching in spots. Garden should be turned for spring planting. Root cellar needs clearing out. More firewood cut and stacked. He glanced at her. You sure you want to stay? It's hard work and I can't offer much comfort yet. Lily met his gaze steadily. I'm not afraid of hard work, Quinn, and this cabin is far more comfortable than the livery stable floor. She hesitated. If you're having second thoughts about our arrangement, no, he said quickly. No second thoughts, just making sure you understand what you're getting into. Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary, and Lily felt a curious warmth bloom in her chest. There was something about Quinn Patterson, a steadiness, a quiet integrity that made her feel secure in a way she hadn't since her parents' deaths. The next weeks fell into a rhythm that surprised Lily with its naturalness. Each morning, they rose at dawn and shared a simple breakfast before tackling the day's work. Quinn taught Lily to care for the horses, while she took charge of creating a garden plot for spring planting. They worked side by side mending fences and patching the cabin roof, their bodies growing accustomed to each other's movements. Twice weekly, one or both would ride into Breckenridge for supplies. With each visit, the townspeople's curiosity about the Patterson marriage seemed to diminish, replaced by casual acceptance. Lily found herself greeted by name at the general store, invited to join the Ladies' Aid Society by Mrs. Winters, and even acknowledged with a grudging nod by Mr. Hargrove. Quinn's work took him away occasionally repairing structures at the mine, helping neighboring ranchers with projects that required his carpentry skills. During these absences, Lily found herself watching the trail for his return with an anticipation that went beyond practical concerns. In the evenings, they would sit before the fire, sometimes talking, sometimes content in silence. Quinn proved to be well-read despite his frontier upbringing, and they discovered a shared appreciation for poetry. Occasionally, he would read aloud from a worn volume of Tennyson or Whitman, his deep voice giving new life to familiar words. As October gave way to November, the mountains received their first dusting of snow, and the nights grew sharper with cold. They had accomplished much in their weeks together. The roof was sound, the corral expanded, and firewood stacked high against the cabin wall. Quinn had even constructed a small covered porch at the cabin entrance, where Lily liked to sit and watch the sunset when weather permitted. It was on such an evening, with the last golden light fading behind the mountains, that Lily realized something had shifted between them. Quinn sat beside her on the rough-hewn bench he'd built, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. They had been discussing plans to smoke the venison he'd hunted that morning when he suddenly fell silent, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "What is it?" Lily asked, noting the tension in his profile. Quinn turned to her, his expression uncharacteristically uncertain. "This arrangement of ours." "It's working well, wouldn't you say?" Lily nodded. "Better than I expected." "Why do you ask?" He shifted slightly, his knee brushing against hers. "Winter's coming. Snow will make the trails difficult. Folks in town might think it strange if my wife suddenly disappeared." "I hadn't thought of leaving," Lily admitted softly. Relief flickered across Quinn's features. "Good, that's good." He cleared his throat. "But I've been thinking about our situation. The deception." Lily's heart quickened. "What about it?" "It bothers me," Quinn said slowly. "Not the arrangement itself, but lying to people I mean to live among for years to come." He met her eyes directly. "I was raised to believe a man's word is his bond. Every time I introduce you as my wife knowing it's not true, it sits wrong." "I understand," Lily said, trying to ignore the disappointment blooming in her chest. "If you'd prefer I leave after all—" "No," Quinn interrupted. "That's not what I'm saying at all." He took a deep breath. "I'm saying perhaps we should consider making it true." Lily stared at him, certain she had misunderstood. "Making what true?" "The marriage," Quinn said quietly. "You and me." The world seemed to still around them as his words hung in the crisp mountain air. Lily's mind raced with confusion, hope, and fear all at once. "Are you proposing?" She finally managed. Quinn ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she had come to recognize as a sign of his discomfort. "Not very romantically, it seems." He took her hand in his calloused fingers warm against her skin. "Lily, I know this started as a convenient lie, but these weeks with you, they've been the best I've known in a long time." "Quinn, let me finish," he said gently. I'm not offering marriage just to maintain appearances or because it's practical, though it is both those things. I'm offering because I've come to care for you, deeply." His thumb traced a small circle on her palm. "I believe we could build something good here together, if you felt the same way." Lily's heart pounded against her ribs. The proposition was sudden, yet somehow not unexpected. Hadn't she felt the growing connection between them with each passing day? The way his presence brought her comfort, his rare smile's warmth. "I do care for you," she admitted softly. "But marriage is a serious commitment. Are you certain this isn't gratitude or convenience talking?" Quinn's expression grew serious. "I've had my share of convenient arrangements, Lily. This isn't that." He released her hand to touch her cheek gently. "When I saw Hargrove threatening you with that whip, something in me couldn't stand by and watch. I told myself it was basic decency, but now I wonder if it wasn't something more like fate putting you in my path when I didn't even know I was looking." Lily leaned slightly into his touch. "I've wondered the same thing." "Is that a yes?" Hope colored his voice. "It's a I need time to think," Lily replied honestly. "This is too important to rush." Quinn nodded, respect evident in his gaze. "Take all the time you need." He stood, offering his hand to help her up. "Meanwhile, that venison won't smoke itself." The days that followed were charged with new awareness. Lily found herself noticing things about Quinn she had overlooked before, the way firelight caught the auburn highlights in his dark hair, how his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the gentle way he handled injured animals and broken things. She caught him watching her too, his gaze lingering when he thought she wouldn't notice. Snow began to fall in earnest, blanketing the landscape in pristine white. Their world narrowed to the cabin and immediate surroundings, trips to town becoming less frequent as the trails grew treacherous. This enforced intimacy might have been uncomfortable, but instead, Lily found it revealed new facets of their compatibility. Quinn taught her to play chess on a set he'd carved himself. Lily showed him how to make the apple dumplings her mother had baked each winter. They read to each other on stormy nights, discussed politics and philosophy, and shared stories from their lives before Colorado. The more Lily learned about Quinn, the more her initial attraction deepened into something richer and more complex. One evening, as a blizzard howled outside, Quinn revealed the burden he carried from his time in the war, the memories of friends lost, the disillusionment that had driven him west seeking a fresh start. Lily, in turn, confessed her fears of ending up alone and destitute like so many women she had seen in city streets back east. "That won't happen," Quinn promised, his hand finding hers across the table. "Not while I'm breathing." The sincerity in his voice warmed her more than the fire blazing in the hearth. That night, as Lily lay in the bed that had become hers by unspoken agreement, listening to Quinn's steady breathing from his pallet near the fire, she realized her answer had been forming all along. Morning brought clear skies and a fresh blanket of snow that sparkled like diamond dust in the sunrise. Lily woke to find Quinn already outside, clearing a path to the woodpile and checking on the horses. She watched him through the window, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air, and felt a certainty settle in her heart. When he returned, stamping snow from his boots at the door, Lily was waiting with hot coffee and her decision. "Yes," she said simply as he hung his coat by the door. Quinn paused, confusion giving way to understanding as he met her gaze. "Yes," he repeated, a question and confirmation in one word. Lily nodded. "If the offer still stands, I'd be honored to be your wife, for real this time." The smile that transformed Quinn's face made her breath catch. In 3 strides, he crossed the cabin and gathered her in his arms, lifting her feet clear off the floor in his enthusiasm. When he set her down, His hands cradled her face with tender reverence. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "I've never been more sure of anything," Lily answered truthfully. His lips found hers then, a gentle question that deepened into certainty as she responded. It was their first kiss, overdue perhaps, but perfect in its timing. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Quinn rested his forehead against hers. "I should have done that weeks ago," he murmured. Lily laughed softly. "We had to get the order right. First marriage, then kissing." Quinn chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly against her. "Speaking of marriage, I suppose we should make it official. Ride into town when the trail clears and find the justice of the peace." "Or the minister," Lily suggested. "I'd like a proper ceremony, even if it's small." "Whatever you want," Quinn agreed, stealing another kiss. "Though technically, according to the town, we're already married." Lily wrapped her arms around his waist. "Let's make it real anyway, for us." The weather cleared enough 3 days later for them to make the journey into Breckenridge. They rode side by side, Lily on Penny and Quinn on his stallion, the snow-covered landscape pristine around them. Lily wore her blue dress, the first gift Quinn had given her, with a woolen shawl against the cold. Breckenridge welcomed them with the usual winter bustle, townsfolk hurrying between buildings to minimize time in the cold. At the church, they found Reverend Thomas stoking the stove in his small office. "Quinn Patterson," the Reverend greeted them warmly. "And Mrs. Patterson. What brings you out in this weather?" Quinn exchanged a glance with Lily before responding. "Actually, Reverend, we've come to arrange our wedding." The minister's bushy eyebrows shot upward. "Your wedding? But I was under the impression you were already married." "We'd like to renew our vows," Lily interjected smoothly. "We were married hastily in Denver without family or proper ceremony. Now that we're settled, we'd like to do things properly." Understanding dawned in the Reverend's kind eyes. Whether he guessed the truth or accepted their explanation, he nodded without pressing further. "A commendable decision. When would you like to hold this ceremony?" "As soon as possible," Quinn replied. "Before the next big snow, if you can manage it." Reverend Thomas consulted a calendar on his desk. "I could perform the ceremony this Sunday after regular services. Would that suit?" They agreed readily, and as they left the church, Quinn squeezed Lily's hand. "Quick thinking with that explanation." Lily smiled. "Not entirely a lie. We are starting fresh, in our own way." Their next stop was the general store, where Quinn surprised Lily by insisting on purchasing fabric for a proper wedding dress. Mrs. Hargrove, hearing of their plans, thawed considerably toward Lily and offered to help with the sewing. "Every bride deserves to feel special on her wedding day," she declared, measuring pale blue silk against Lily's complexion. "Even second-time brides." Word of the ceremony spread quickly through the small town. By the time they left Breckenridge that afternoon, several families had offered contributions. Mrs. Winters would bake a cake. Mr. Sullivan from the hotel would provide punch, and even Sheriff Bolton promised to attend with his wife. "Seems we've been accepted," Quinn observed as they rode home. "It feels strange," Lily admitted, "to be welcomed by the same people who were ready to see me whipped months ago." Quinn's expression darkened at the memory. "People are quick to judge and slow to understand, but they're not all bad. They just needed to see you as a person, not a stranger." The days leading up to Sunday passed in a flurry of preparation. True to her word, Mrs. Hargrove helped Lily create a simple but elegant dress from the blue silk, its color reminiscent of the mountain sky in summer. Quinn rode to neighboring homesteads to invite the scattered families who had shown kindness during his early days in Colorado. On Sunday morning, Lily woke to find a small velvet box beside her pillow. Inside was a gold band, simple but finely crafted. "It was my mother's," Quinn explained when she found him outside. "My pa gave it to me before he passed, said I should save it for the right woman." Tears pricked at Lily's eyes as she closed her fingers around the ring. "I'm honored, Quinn." The church was unexpectedly full when they arrived that afternoon. It seemed most of Breckenridge had turned out for the ceremony, curious to witness the Pattersons' vow renewal. Reverend Thomas had decorated the altar with pine boughs and the last dried flowers of autumn, their scent mingling with candle wax in the warm space. Quinn stood at the altar as Lily walked down the short aisle, her hand resting on the arm of Mr. Winters, who had volunteered to give her away. The expression on Quinn's face, when he saw her wonder mixed with profound tenderness, was one Lily knew she would remember for the rest of her days. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful, their voices clear and certain as they exchanged vows. When Quinn slipped his mother's ring onto Lily's finger and the reverend pronounced them husband and wife, the small church erupted in enthusiastic applause. Quinn's kiss was restrained but full of promise that made Lily's cheeks flush with anticipation. The celebration afterward surprised them both with its warmth and generosity. Tables had been set up in the church hall, laden with food contributed by various townspeople. Even Mr. Hargrove had donated several bottles of his best wine for the occasion. As they accepted congratulations from neighbors new and old, Lily caught sight of Rose from the Silver Dollar, standing quietly at the back of the hall. Their eyes met briefly before Rose offered a small, surprisingly genuine smile and a slight nod before slipping out. "I think we've managed to convince everyone," Lily murmured to Quinn as they shared the cake Mrs. Winters had baked. "Including ourselves," Quinn replied, his hand warm against the small of her back. "Though I never needed much convincing where you were concerned." The winter sun was already setting when they finally took their leave, loaded with gifts and well wishes for their journey home. Snow had begun to fall again, soft flakes drifting lazily in the gathering dusk as they rode the familiar trail to their cabin. Home felt different that night, warmer, more intimate as they crossed the threshold as true husband and wife. Quinn built up the fire while Lily hung her wedding dress carefully behind the curtain that no longer separated them. When she turned, she found him watching her, his eyes reflecting the firelight and something deeper. "Mrs. Patterson," he said softly, extending his hand to her. Lily took it without hesitation, stepping into his embrace. "That's me, for real this time." His kiss was different from those that had come before, unhurried yet urgent, tender yet demanding. Lily responded in kind, her hands finding their way into his hair as his arms tightened around her waist. "I've wanted to hold you like this since that first day," Quinn confessed against her neck. "Even when I barely knew you." "I'm yours now," Lily whispered. "And you're mine." That night, they discovered each other fully for the first time, learning the language of touch and whispered endearments that would become familiar in the months and years to come. As snow blanketed the world outside, they created a sanctuary of warmth within, their bodies and hearts entwined in the firelight. Winter deepened, but the cabin remained warm with their shared life and growing love. They established new routines as husband and wife, finding joy in simple pleasures and weathering occasional disagreements with mutual respect. Quinn continued his carpentry work when weather permitted, while Lily took charge of their home, planning improvements for spring and helping with the horses. By February, they had news to share. Lily was expecting their first child, due in late summer. Quinn's reaction, speechless joy followed by tender concern, confirmed what she already knew. The man who had saved her from the whipping post would be an exceptional father. As winter reluctantly yielded to spring, the land around their cabin came alive with new purpose. Quinn broke ground for expanded pasture, while Lily planted the vegetable garden she had planned during winter evenings. True to his word, Quinn set aside a sunny slope near the creek for apple saplings, ordering 6 young trees from a nursery in Denver. "For our children," he said as they planted them together, his hand resting protectively on Lily's slightly rounded belly. "And their children after them." Lily looked around at their growing homestead, the cabin with its new addition under construction, the expanded corral where 3 mares now grazed alongside Quinn's stallion, the creek sparkling in the spring sunshine. All of it had seemed impossible that hot August day when she'd stood facing the whipping post in Breckenridge. "What are you thinking?" Quinn asked, noting her contemplative expression. Lily smiled, covering his hand with hers. "That sometimes the worst moments can lead to the greatest blessings. If I hadn't been desperate enough to steal that bread, we would have found each other another way," Quinn said with quiet certainty. "Some things are meant to be." In July, their daughter Amelia was born, with Quinn's blue eyes and Lily's delicate features. By then, the Patterson Horse Ranch was becoming known in the county for its quality stock, and the cabin had evolved into a proper home with Quinn's craftsmanship evident in every corner. Breckenridge, too, had evolved in its relationship with the Pattersons. Lily was now a respected member of the community, serving on the school board and teaching a weekly reading group. The incident with the bread had faded from most memories, and those who remembered chose not to mention it. 5 years after that fateful day at the whipping post, Lily stood on their front porch, watching Quinn teach their son James to ride his first pony while Amelia practiced her letters at the kitchen table. The apple trees were bearing fruit, and the mountains stood eternal against the summer sky. A rider approached up the long drive, Sheriff Bolton, older now but still serving Breckenridge. He tipped his hat to Lily as he dismounted. "Afternoon, Mrs. Patterson. Is Quinn around?" "In the corral with James," Lily replied, offering water to the visitor. "Everything all right in town?" The sheriff accepted the drink gratefully. "Just fine. Actually came out to ask if Quinn might be interested in serving on the town council. There's an opening and several folks suggested him." Lily smiled at the irony. The woman who had nearly been publicly whipped was now married to a prospective town leader. "I'm sure he'd be honored to be considered." Later that night, with the children asleep and the house quiet, Lily and Quinn sat on their porch swing, her head resting against his shoulder as stars appeared overhead. "Town councilman," Lily mused. "Not bad for a man who lied to the sheriff about having a wife." Quinn chuckled, his arm tightening around her. "Best lie I ever told, though technically it became the truth." "The very best truth," Lily agreed, tilting her face up for his kiss. As their lips met, Lily reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from desperate strangers to devoted partners, building a legacy of love on land that had once seemed merely a refuge. Quinn had stepped forward to save her that day, claiming her as his wife to spare her pain. Neither could have imagined then that his impulsive declaration would lead to this life they had created together, rich with purpose and love. Sometimes, Lily thought as she settled deeper into her husband's embrace, the most beautiful stories begin with an act of courage and a necessary lie. And sometimes, those lies become the truest thing of all.